I'm going to start my talk by sort of going through how I came to Buddhism, and then sort of through that, hopefully, what will come out is what being a Buddhist sort of means practically in my life, and how what does it mean for me to be a Buddhist. Um, so whilst technically only first came to a Buddhist center 2.5 years ago. My sort of journey to Buddhism really started probably about 7 years ago, roughly when I turned about 18, 19. Um, Really sort of was the death of my granddad, actually, um, and for quite a long period of time, quite a sort of painful period for my family. Um, that I think was a really kind of strong sort of before and after period in terms of before that. I mean, obviously I was a teenager, but before that, never really having any much contact with religion or spirituality, being quite, I suppose, sort of quite, I don't know, shallow or in it all. I mean, in the sense of, having never had an experience like that, you're not really going to be thinking terribly existentially. Um, and that happening sort of just before starting university, the death of my granddad, really sort of sparked, I think probably at a deeper level, not terribly subconsciously, but at a sort of more subconscious level, more more of a sort of like these sort of questions about what are we doing here? What is life about? Um, and actually the first sort of avenue I went for exploring this was Christianity. I was very involved in sort of Christian versions of this, actually, in Oxford. There were sort of similar kind of things going on. Like sort of having people exploring Christianity, having like talks about it rather than just going to church and doing the sort of the ritual stuff. Um, and there was a long period, although there was a period where I was very invested in that and invested in sort of philosophical stuff. But then I don't know, sort of life happens, other things get in the way, and it kind of my interest in sort of spirituality or going deeper with this type of sort of these kind of questions sort of faded in and out over a few years. Um, and it sort of came in and out really with sort of how well things were going, basically. So it was quite a challenging, understandably, quite a challenging first year of university. And then sort of after I sort of got my feet under the table, I sort of quickly kind of forgot about all this religion stuff, all the spirituality stuff. I was kind of interested in that. I was much more interested in getting a girlfriend and having a fun time. And then it was sort of then during COVID again, and my master's, and it wasn't as sort of challenging as that previous time, but it was sort of that was when I started sort of, I don't know, coming into contact again with the idea there was something slightly shallow about how I was thinking about life or how I was approaching life. Um, and really, the thing I wanted to sort of pick out on in this talk uh, was that there was two very sort of conflicting visions, so to speak, about sort of what to do about this that I was sort of flirting with. One was a sort of um, relax, let go, sort of self-discovery type thing. I was very into Alan Watts and these sort of, Alan Watts YouTube videos with all this lovely music. And, I was very into that kind of thing. But at the same time, I was also interested very much in the idea of self-development and sort of striving towards something. And these two visions are quite sort of contradictory, like the idea of striving on the surface, at least, the idea of striving towards something as being what you do to have a meaningful life, or relaxing in and letting go. Sort of how do you sort of square this? Because there seemed to be sort of logic to both of these that was compelling, but challenging for me to work out how to sort of integrate this or to how to do both. Um, and throughout that whole 4 year period, and even watching Alan Watts, I never remotely considered Buddhism. I've literally been to where the Dalai Lama lived, and I've never, I know it just never, for whatever reason, I just didn't know anything about it. I just didn't know. I'd explored Taoism and other Eastern traditions, and it was in Oxford, and well, I first came across the Dharma, came across via meetup.com. To the Oxford Buddhist Centre advertises events on meetup.com. Turn up and it's a gazebo in an organic garden with two old women in blankets. We break out in 5 minutes into going there into speaking in Pali. And I'm sort of a slightly, part of me is freaked out and part of me is very intrigued. And I keep coming back, and there's something there in the Oxford Buddhist Centre that really resonates with me. Um, but at that time, I was on a short-term contract, living in a house infested with rats, and it wasn't really the best sort of conditions to really sort of stably sort of explore the Dharma or practice in my life. I was sort of having to sort out other things, and really, then it was when I came to Cambridge, when I came across the Cambridge Buddhist Centre and had sort of a more sort of stable condition, so to speak. Um, that things started to sort of flourish, really. I think when I sort of reflect back on to why I became a Buddhist or sort of autobiographically, how did that happen? There's sort of, I think, really sort of coming back to what I was just saying about vision and these very competing visions, about sort of letting go, and sort of self-discovery, so to speak, through letting go and self-development and sort of surrendering to something to develop towards, so to speak, or develop because of. Um, it was really sort of coming here a lot in 2023, and being involved here quite a lot back then, um, and coming across an articulation really of the Buddhist vision, or yeah, the Buddhist vision, coming across the Dharma as it was presented here, that really sort of drew me towards Buddhism as something to give a go, as something that sort of was like, oh, this is something that I can, that makes sense, that integrates these. Like, it's not just sort of letting go and just like sort of splurging. It's like letting go of a self-preoccupation and sort of a focus on the self all the time and what you can gain for the self. And it's not just sort of striving, therefore, to gain more and more stuff for the self, but striving so striving, sort of focusing externally on what you can give to other people, or focusing externally on sort of, I don't know, yeah, focusing on what you can give to other people and holding other people in awareness. So really, there was a really critical sort of point there where, yeah, the vision to me was articulated, but there was sort of a further step to come from that, um, really about making commitment, as you were saying, the importance of particularly making a commitment to practice, so that, in a sense, so that the vision becomes something that you actually have some kind of emotional, to beyond just pure reason, rationality connection with. So actually making the commitment properly to going vegetarian, something that in my like sort of secular environmental kind of mind, I've been sort of dabbling with the idea of for 4 years. And it was actually sort of probably the Metta Bhavana and um, the wider concept of the Dhamma that really sort of actually sort of create the emotional ground for me to actually make the change to becoming vegetarian. That in turn I've seen like sort of has, I don't know, what's the best way of saying this? Has sort of there's a loop there where the more that you sort of practice, or the more that you explore how to practice ethical precepts, for example, such as the precept of not harming, the more that it sort of comes to life, the more that sort of teachings of the Dharma come to life through trying to practice the, for example, like the teaching or the teaching of interconnectedness. Um, And then it was sort of through that more and more I actually sort of notice, you know, Buddhism in a nutshell, it's about working with your mind. I mean, that's, it's a particular type of working with your mind, but it is in a sense at its basic level, it's working with your mind, and it's working with your mind to have a more creative orientation to the world. And there is, there's no randomized control trial that one can run of one's own life. But I do have quite a lot of confidence that the meditation practice and the practice of ethics, or we tend to practice in the detail of ethics, because it's more challenging than just being vegetarian, has helped me have a more creative orientation, just in the way that I see the world, and the way that you can have, to be more specific, I really do notice that there are things that, like in work or in other situations, that before, like I know from how I know myself and how I've changed, that I would have reacted more impulsively or acted on my initial reaction, and a situation would have gone in a more negative way had I not been cultivating a sense of cultivating both awareness of myself and awareness of other people. And that creativity, cultivating a more creative orientation to the world, I think is, for me, the sort of ultimate reason, or one of my sort of ultimate kind of, I don't know, that's really at the crux of why I sort of continue to be a Buddhist, or because it's not to sort of come to a conclusion. It's not really about sort of going through the hoops of sort of just doing the sort of the Buddhist things. It's about noticing what they're doing, what the effect of that is on your mind, and responding to that, and keeping alive a sort of a responsiveness with the effects of it, and being in a dialogue with I don't know, what those effects are telling you, basically. And that ultimately, it's really an incredible adventure, to be honest, because it makes the mundane, or it makes the seemingly mundane much more alive. It makes every day much more a sort of thing to, like, I don't know, what we can search for stimulation in so many things, but actually Buddha's practice makes us realize that there's sort of so much more that's actually of interest than we are alive to, with just, when we're in that searching state. But yeah. I hope that was some explanation of why I'm a Buddhist. There we are.